We're going to make small jump rings and then do a little bit of delicate soldering. These are castings, but first we'll make the small jump rings. Now the jump rings that are going to go through this are made out of 1.2 wires. So what I'm going to do is make the inside diameter of my jump ring 1.5, and the mandrel that I'm using is just the smooth end of a 1.5 drill bit. You can buy a cheap set of drills and then you just turn them backwards. You put the fluted end inside your drill and then you wrap your wire around the shank and you'll have a perfect size. So make sure that only the smooth part of the drill bit is sticking out, and I just stick the end of the wire in the chuck. Stop before you get to the end, don't let that flip through your fingers. And there are your little jump rings. Now, the bad thing about this mandrel is you can't make very many jump rings, but then you probably wouldn't want to. I just clip the tag ends off so they're easier to hold. And normally I just hold it between my fingers on the end of the bench peg. Saw at about a 45-degree angle. And if you have trouble when you get to the end holding it, I just use a cocktail toothpick and it holds it enough to work. I didn't say anything about breaking the saw blade because it's just a fact of life. Now, when you have your jump ring cut, what you're going to do is close it. I use two sets of parallel jaw pliers. I close it, grab it at the top, switch my pliers to the bottom, and then file a flat right where the join is. Now this is ready to use. Now whatever you're going to solder your jump ring onto needs to have a little flat filed on it. And we're ready to go. Now what I don't do is I don't hold the jump ring in my third hand. Hardly ever. What I do is I'll put it on a charcoal block. I hold the piece that I want to solder it to, because seldom is the piece I'm soldering it to flat enough that I can just put it on the block. So I use my third hand to hold the piece, put my jump ring against it. I'll zoom this in so you can see. So you can see that my flat on the jump ring is now nicely against the flat on the piece. So at this point we're going to put just a small amount of flex on it. And place one piece of hard solder right where the two bits touch. Now we're going to use a neutral flame. I'm using the Smith's mini torch. Slowly heat this up until your flux dries out. Once the flux dries out, you can make sure your solder is at the right spot. So you can see I'm just heating the main part of the object. I'm not heating the jump ring. The spillover of the flame will be plenty to heat the jump ring. So you can see I've got the solder tucked right where the two touch. Now what you want is for both of these to be the same temperature so that when the solder flows, it'll just flow into the join rather than jumping on one or the other. Done. Quench it, pickle it, and you're finished. Another way of doing this is you can use your pick to pick up a piece of solder. Bring the two pieces up to temperature, and you'll know that they're at the right temperature when the flux goes clear. And then you can just position the solder with your pick. It should flow almost immediately. Done. Either way works well. So now we have a nice little piece with a very aesthetic small jump ring, so that when we make it into a piece like this, the big jump ring doesn't overpower the detail of what we're trying to show off. Final thing is I used 1.2 millimeter wire for the jump ring with a 1.5 hole, and that was so that it visually matched the rest of what I was doing. All of these jump rings are also 1.2, and I used a slightly smaller one to hold the charm on, just to make it a little more aesthetic.